Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Today with a very special guest, Maryem Rahim. She's an Atlas Core Fellow, Class 29, serving at Global Communities. And she'll be recording a very interesting webinar about the future of jobs and skills in the development sector. Maryem, hi.
Hi everyone, my name is Maryem. I'm an Atlas Core Fellow from Pakistan, Class 29, serving at Global Communities as Economic Development Fellow. Today I'll be talking about future of jobs and skill in the development sector. So during the September GLL, I am moderated a session from Mr. Rajkumar, who is the head of DevEx. And we had a really insightful discussion on the future of jobs and skill in the social sector in general. And there was a lot of positive feedback on the discussion we had, and some of the fellows were interested in knowing more on about this area. Before I get into the details of what we are going to discuss today, I'll just give you a brief about what I've been doing in this sector. And workforce development, social protection, job diagnosis has been an area of special interest to me, and especially in the developing markets where we don't have we have a very small scale prevalence of private sector. I have worked in this area for almost 5 years now. And as much as I've worked, I think over the years, I've learned a lot in terms of how things have changed drastically in this sector. 'Cause this is, I mean, overall market dynamics has also changed, and they have become more fast-paced especially for the private sector. But it will be very surprising for you to know that development sector has also changed completely from how things were used to be done 5 years ago, and what's the outlook of this sector in the future. It's going to be completely on a different landscape. Some of the overall changes that are there in the market are like very well known to most of you. Like, for instance, technology has become an integral part of every thing now. I mean, every intervention that you're doing now, or every organization, international or local organization that is working on different social issues, they have kind of adopted and integrated technology in most of their work. And because of that, a lot of landscape has also changed. But there are other things that I have and drastically shifted. The issues have shifted. The need for development has also taken a new shape. Some of the I'll start by discussing some of the trends in this sector, and then with the uprising trends in this sector, which are very prevalent these days, and then we'll move. Then I'll discuss the skill requirement, keeping in consideration those changing trends. The first trend that I'll discuss, and which might resonate with most of you, is the rise of conflict around the world. So, I mean, this might not sound like a news to you guys, but then again, I mean, the because it has you see it in news every day, but you don't realize how it has affected the life of people on ground, and also how it has also affected the whole landscape of development sector. Because now, if you see, some of the issues are just concentrated in these conflicted regions. They're not so one has to kind of like see, like, for instance, poverty will become concentrated in fragile and conflicted areas. It will be highly prevalent in conflicted regions in other areas. And In order to and conflict is and has become a part of every community. If you look around, you'll also see in even in the developed state, it has kind of like risen from what it was before, unfortunately. So in order to kind of like deal with this as because most of the development work is with the communities, and if you have to work with the communities, you have to kind of take this as a part of your an issue which is part of every community. So today, the practitioners of this sector will need to grapple with the issue of violence, conflict, and messy politics. If the idea behind the doing development differently network prospers, there will be a premium on the kind of adaptive skills necessary to dance with the system rather than rolling out the best practices. So, I mean, previously there was a high emphasis on having best practices and then taking those best practices and taking them to a context and implementing them. um, that has to change, and that is changing because the context is changing every day. Your dynamics are changing every day, because and it is highly one of the reason of this changing context is the conflict around in these communities. So in order to deal with that, they have to kind of analyze and assess those communities, uh, uh, and then develop the framework, or roll out the practices accordingly. They have to, like I said, they'll have to dance with the system rather than rolling out the best practice. So this I mean, now whatever references that we had previously, those references have to change, and they have to be very much contextualized. Um, s- uh, so, so it whenever you any of the practitioner in this sector are designing an intervention, they have to keep this in mind that rather than you cannot take a practice as it is and then implement it with as a best practice and implement it in some context. You'll have to have an assessment and of that context, and then um, um, contextualize it. The second most important thing is localization of humanitarian response for the long-term development programs. There's a high push from the developments, the donors, and other NGOs in the development sector to localize the um, humanitarian response. By localizing the humanitarian response, I mean that you develop the capacity of local people in the community to respond to all the humanitarian assistance. That it is very much there in communities, but not at the large scale. My second point is very much linked to the first point, as we see that the crisis and violence has increased drastically. So, and I mean, crisis is not just because, so the crisis is basically of two types. One is man-made, and others is because of the disasters. um, and both of them have increased over the time. So in order to immediately respond and develop a proactive approach towards dealing with these issues, the capacity of local people will have to be built, and resilience, the design of resilience will be developed around their capacities. So, uh, so I mean, when humanitarian action is actually intended to save lives and alleviate suffering and maintain human dignity during and after the crisis. So, if the response is not immediate, and if the response is not as per the requirement of that issue, then there is no point of that response. And because of the changing dynamics of the need of the sector, like a lot of, then again, I'm going back to the issue of conflict and crisis. A lot of funding is now going to the humanitarian response rather than the development action. So you'll see a huge rise in the jobs for humanitarian assistance than the development jobs. For like, for instance, developing frameworks for an effective health system or developing framework for an effective education system. A lot of that will shift to the issues of dealing with conflict and crisis. So running projects in the developing countries is a job of people, and people in and from those countries. So therefore there will be a lot of employment opportunity in that space. uh, um, as since I spoke about localizing the humanitarian response. When you're localizing the humanitarian response, you're building the capacity of local people. But at the same time, we need to see that there is a change in the geopolitical landscape. So, in order to to kind of like cope up with the changing geopolitical landscape, it is important that the skills that are provided to these local practitioners are very global, because the geopolitical landscape is constantly changing and has far-reaching implications for the social sector and talent mobility. So, so the practitioners of the sector should look out for skills which are more global than local. They should look out for skills which have more utility internationally, yet locally as well. I mean, they will be equally prevalent in the local context as well. So, if if you want to see a career progression in this sector, then you need to have an eye for both the local skills that are required and the international skills that will be very much prevalent in the same area that you're working in. The fourth important point that I would want to discuss is the rise of private sector. Aid itself is increasingly being administered by the private companies. But given the declining overall importance of aid in the developing countries, other form of private sector activity will matter more in the longer term. Sorting out supply chain of global companies, taking social enterprise through its current hype into something that makes genuine contribution, making markets work for poor. So these are the upcoming trends which are becoming part of this sector. In the past couple of years, you must have seen there is a huge rise in the foundation of the corporate organization. There, take Nestle or take Unilever, take Procter and Gamble, take Coca Cola. All these organization big names have their foundations, not just in the FMCG market. Other Caterpillar has is a construction company, and they have a foundation of their own. Um, and I mean, name any organization, and you'll see they have a foundation which is working mostly in the areas that these corporate organizations are working. Like, for instance, Caterpillar is a foundation would is mostly dealing with the issues where they require skilled labor to do the construction work, and especially in the communities that they're working. So a lot of shift from the donation coming from donors to the funds coming from the private sector. And the private sector will take a bigger magnitude of giving out funds and directly to the communities than going through different donors. So, considering that this context is completely shifting, the way things will be done will also change, because the private sector organization will focus more on the idea of shared values and the strategic philanthropy, where they would want a win-win situation for the community as well as their businesses. So, for instance, if in an organization, if Caterpillar is working in some country in Africa, um, they would want to develop the skill of people in construction in that area, then in health or governance, so that they can utilize this. Theoretically, it is a um very important and very useful model, but at the same time, there will be a lot of issues that may not be addressed because of this concentration of money for a win-win situation. But that is but then again, like I said, there are a lot of private organizations out there that are working. So if we look at the scale of these organizations, maybe majority of them might be able to cover um, most of the issues out there, but then with the very very small segments of population. So, in order to for organizations for social enterprises to reach out for different funds, they need to kind of like focus more on private organizations than donors. Um, and also, the funds coming from private organization have a different impact model than the funds coming from donors. Um, Moving ahead, the next point is the push for evidence, result, and value for money. I am sure this is also not a news to most of you that data has become so prevalent in everything that we are doing these days. Um, Evidence, 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 evidence is like an integral part of every design now. And also the value for money. How is this money making an impact, and what impact is this? Where is that impact? You have to. Everything is in numbers. Everything is in figures. Everything is like there has to be a good evidence behind the kind of work that you're doing. Most of it is done through technology, but some of them, and it is hard to see this trend going in reverse. Although I hope it becomes more advanced and intelligent, better able to cope with complexity and unpredictability, and to stop pushing projects towards like unnecessary measurable stuff. But then again, it lessons here is to learn the skills and jargons of being counter, and then adapt them to make all our activities more effective. um, the skills required to analyze the data, to visualize the data, to compute the data, they will be very much relevant in the coming jobs. And I think this is going to be part of every most of the interventions that will be done out there. And like I said, there is a lot of funding coming from the private sector, and the private sector is really high on numbers, and they want evidence. They want their future planning based on some precedent. So, have um, in order to design and implement interventions in the future, these skills will be the skills related to data will be highly important. Um, then again, as I discussed briefly before, technology digitization is everything now. Um, but then again, you need to be aware of the hype. Yes, there probably is an app that can help you with anything that you're thinking, or any whatever problem you have, but it won't substitute for interplay of power, organization, and struggle. And in any case, the app is probably best written by a bunch of coders. It in order to understand technology, one needs to know the kind of technology that is out there, the impact of that technology, and then what skill would be required around that technology by not just the technical people out there, by other people who will also use that technology. Um, uh, I mean, I, like I said in the beginning, this trend is very much prevalent in every sector, in every segment of development sector. I mean, in order to now I'll move on to the skills that are required regarding the data, regarding the technology, um, and so there's some of the I'll be discussing some of the technical skills, but then again, some of the it is also important to highlight some of the soft skills that are required. Um, a lot of reports out there put a more emphasis in the soft skills than the technical skills. Uh, the technical skills that will be required around the different trends that I've discussed are data management, data visualization, machine learning, and technology is just not limited to the job or to your job description. It has a bigger implication in the lives of people out there. For instance, new technologies are enabling workforce innovation such as remote working, co-work co-workspace, and teleconferences conferencing. And uh, and I mean, in order to kind of like adapt yourself according to that environment, it is important that you should know these some of the basic technology skills that are out there, and how different innovations are done. In it's like I said, it's not limited to a certain job. It has a bigger implication, and one needs to understand what is the implication out there in changing the whole workspace, or in utilizing it more effectively in different elements, like for instance, doing procurement more effectively through technology, or doing other administrative things more effectively through technology. So every it is become a compulsory element for every worker in the organization to adapt, to uh, identify and adapt to the changing dynamics because of technology. Um, so, moving on to the soft skills that will be required are some of the soft skills. There are a lot out there that one should learn and one should um, improvise. But then again, I think that some of the soft skills that are very much prevalent to the issues that I have discussed earlier are cognitive flexibility. The cognitive flexibility involves creativity, logical reasoning, and problem sensitivity. One needs to analyze it, one needs to have cognitive flexibility to analyze the problems, analyze the issues in their communities, and it also has a high emphasis on being able to adapt how you communicate based on who you're talking to. And employees would want to know you don't just say the same thing to everyone, that you think critically about who you're talking to, deeply listen, and tailor your communication according to that person, especially when you're working with different communities out there, especially when you're designing projects for different contexts, um, and um, and changing with changing landscape. How do you kind of like adapt quickly and improvise? So it is very important that you are not rigid in terms of your thinking. You have like that flexibility, and you have more. spontaneous in terms of whatever decisions you have to take. So one needs to practice these skills in their daily routine to be more flexible in terms of your lifestyle and more flexible in terms of your thinking process to be more adaptive. Then service orientation. Um, this was defined as actively seeking ways to help others and how much can you assist people in your team, and then also outside your team, people in the community, your your skills, uh, your service orientation skills with your donors, your service orientation with your team, your service orientation with your community. So it has different levels, but one needs to know how to and you need one needs to know how to tailor according to the different stakeholders they are dealing with, and the kind of services have to be very much customized to the person that you're dealing with. It is the employers will in the future are highly emphasizing these are some of the skills and the technical and soft skills, and I have narrowed them down from different researches, from Forbes and from other ILO reports. There's a high emphasis on service orientation, the kind of service you're providing out there. Judgment and decision making. This brings us back to the first point that we discussed. You have to assess your environment, you have to assess the issue, and then instantly make a decision. The requirement, uh, I mean, the need, you sometimes, and I mean, the practice out there has changed. There is a need. Organization collect more and more data, and there will be even greater need for worker to analyze and use the intelligent decisions. Good judgment is also involved knowing how to get buy-in from the colleagues, and also strong suggestions from a manager, even if they might be popular, but then again one has to decide instantly. Your decisions, you should have a capacity to analyze and decide based on the evidence that you have. Emotional intelligence, it's extremely important. um, and considering we work with very sensitive issues out there, one needs to know how to be employers will place a strong emphasis on hiring people who are aware of others' emotions, as well as how they're going to impact others. You need to analyze their own emotions and emotion of other person, and then deal accordingly. Knowing the need is one thing, but knowing mm, emotionally dealing with the problem is also another important skill that one needs to have. Um, the practitioners should put themselves in the shoe of the community members out there, and then um, analyze and decide, make come to a decision. Lastly, adaptive skills, and this also has been covered in different skills that I've mentioned earlier. Adaptive skills is also brings us back to point number one, where you have cognitive flexibility. When you have cognitive flexibility, you are more adaptive to different kind of context that you're working with, different kind of issues that you're dealing with. So one size can't fit all. You need to understand the context and adapt accordingly. These are some of the skills, and these are some of the uprising trends that are there in the development sector, um, and then concurrently, these are some of the skills that will be required in this sector for an effective development course. uh, practitioners need to look out for these, like when you're learning a skill, you need to be um, more aware of what skills can be more beneficial for you in the future. Just learning skills, uh, as we know that when job market changes, you have to change yourself accordingly. Likewise, this sector has changed a lot, and I think we it is important for us to kind of like change, identify, and adopt accordingly. Thank you so much. I hope you like the webinar, and if there are any
Thank you very
questions,
much, Mariam, for this very insightful webinar. I learned so much. So, guys, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to write them down. And thank you so much.
thank you, Ons.
Bye.